Suzi, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. Uh,
Wonderful to be here, Haris. Thank you.
Looking forward, this is the podcast that I was really looking for. Uh,
Me too.
Suzi,
Me too.
thank you. Thank you. Suzi, I've been really wondering, reading a lot of stuff about what you've written, and you speak about identity for
Mm.
leaders. And that is something that always kind of makes me curious to learn more from you. Uh, Tell me a little bit about identity uh, for leaders that you speak about.
Yes, it's a really important foundation, Haris, and it's something that I've spent literally the since 2011. First piece of research I did was looking at, what is it that executives are working on in their executive coaching engagements, apart from skills and competencies, which at an executive level they don't tend to be working on. What my research showed, particularly back then and in terms of women, was that they were working on who they were as a leader. So
Mm,
who they were as a human. We have multiple roles, multiple identities,
mhm,
sister, mother, friend, manager. And what came out of that research was a really important insight that knowing who we are as a leader, what kind of
mm,
leader we want to be in the world, who we're becoming, what is the legacy we want to bring, what are the principles by which we'll lead by, that's
mm,
actually foundational to leading well. And so
mm,
I have spent the last sort of 14 years working with individuals all over the world, helping them articulate their own uniqueness as a leader. And
mm,
it sounds really sort of academic, but actually I've asked people in emerging countries that aren't in management roles, frontline teams. People can tell you who they are as a leader if you ask them, if you go
mm,
looking for it. So
mm,
it's been a real passion of mine to just help people, no matter where they are in terms of work, in their lives, where they're leading, whether at home, in their communities, in the work that they do. Who is it that they're being? Where do those ideas come from? Where were they formed? Given your psychology background, Haris, I know you know that we form ideas around leadership in the playground when we're 3 or 4.
mm,
So I've had the privilege of hearing people's stories and helping them understand what parts of those definitions of who they are as a leader are useful for them today and that they
mm,
rely on, and what belief systems they might want to update, what
mm,
story they might want to change.
mm,
So for me, it's core to being able to lead consistently and well,
mm,
is about knowing who you are
mm.
as a leader. Yeah.
And and when you say, if I am to really draft for myself a definition to figure out what identity would be, how would you define identity as a word for anyone in
Mm.
simple words?
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because actually, if you look at the literature, the concept of a leader identity and what leadership is not agreed, right? Every sort of leadership researcher would give you a different definition. The definition for identity is really just a knowledge structure, something that sits in our brains, our knowledge around ourselves. So it's a level of self-awareness, it's a level of self-insight. So it tells us both who we are and why, but it really is a sort of something that's built up over time that we
Hmm.
also need to cultivate.
Hmm. So who am I and why am I? That right. So
Mm,
that's like my
yeah,
identity. Yeah.
yeah.
Good. Good. And you did speak about belief systems there, Susie. What is the relationship between identity and belief system?
Well, belief systems are a core driver for identity. So I would say a belief system is one of the elements of how we can define ourselves as leaders, or how we can define any of our identities. What are the guiding principles and the beliefs that
Hmm.
make up that identity? What's really interesting in some of the work we've done recently is this idea of multiplicity, Haris, that every one of us has multiple parts of who we are. And
Mm-hmm.
so actually we could have an identity as a leader, that is sort of bound up with various belief systems and principles and values. And then we could have an identity as a mother and find that there are different belief systems at play, or that the belief systems are more prominent in one identity versus another. And so part of our work as we become more self-aware, or we call it selves-aware, is actually to understand the ways in which our values and beliefs show up differently in different contexts. So when I'm leading at home, as an example, who am I being versus when I'm leading in the workplace, and how do I get to know those different parts of myself so that I can more actively manage, right? Manage how I show up in different contexts.
So so identity is really about who am I and why am I like that, and belief is a guiding principle, you're saying. And I like the concept of multiplicity. So that really means is how do I show up in different areas of life? Yeah. And so
Yes.
okay. Talk to me a little bit more. So multiplicity is about different identities and different belief systems around those identities.
Yes. So I've been doing a lot of research work with Dr. Paul Lawrence, and it's in our latest book, The Wise Leader. How do we become more wise? And one of the core messages in that is that if you think about the ways in which we tend to talk about ourselves as one person, I am the one person, and yet we all know that we can be quite different and triggered or interested and motivated by different things based on where we are. So context is really important. So there's lots of literature out there now, Haris, that says actually we are many little selves, mini selves, if you like, and that exists perhaps within a sort of a narrative about who we are, but that changes based on who we're with. That actually who we are is formed in relationship with others, and that our work is to get to know the different parts of who we are, to welcome them in, rather than push aside perhaps parts of ourselves that we've been taught or learned. Talk about belief systems are not helpful. Actually, this sort of stream of research says that all the parts of who you are, that you can recognize who you are, serve a purpose, and that purpose is important to understand. So it's a lot deeper, I call it sort of next level self-awareness, Haris.
And what you're saying about who you are depends upon who you are with. Yeah. So I think we can really change sorry, go ahead, you're saying something.
Well, I love that you picked up on that, because it makes me think about if you think about organizational systems and the way that we do 360 feedback as an example. And the research is pretty clear that at least 50% of the time people walk away from a 360 feedback session demotivated. Because they're told to do more of this and less of that, be more of this and more of that in different settings. And this actually challenges that and says, well, actually, what parts of yourselves do you need to bring to that environment? What parts of yourselves are you bringing already and that's working well? What do you have within you? What else do you have within you that you can bring to this different setting? So it gives us far more permission to really adapt and adjust our styles. And I think that's what we're being asked to do more and more, right? We talk about adaptive leadership, the ways in which we can understand which selves we want to bring forward in the environment that we're in, and which selves we perhaps might need to dial down. So there's a lot more flexibility around this sort of way of thinking.
And all of that also depends on our belief system, right? Which one do we dial up and which one do we dial down?
Yes, and there is research to show that there is a very valid percentage of the population, I think less than 10% of the population, that when they're presented with this idea of multiplicity, that they would reject it and say, no, there's just one me. Right? It's just me, and that's it. And that's an absolutely valid, authentic response. It's been interesting for us as we've been with different individuals and teams that actually, generally speaking, when you ask someone, what are the different parts of who you are, they can tell you, right? They can say, oh, that's the driver me. Yeah, he really gets in my way. And, that's the impatient me. And so it just opens up a dialogue for people to understand more about the ways in which we do respond in different environments and how we can do that even better, more wisely.
And I think to become more wise, reflective practice is an important element of how do we really become more aware as a leader.
Yes,
Yeah.
beautifully said. There was a research paper done a few years ago that asked some of the top scholars in wisdom to rate what are the capacities that really help drive wisdom and growth, and how do we cultivate it? And reflection was number 2 in the list, right? So 30 scholars. The number one, if you're interested, the number one sort of capacity was recognizing the limitations of our own knowledge, followed by this reflective practice. So yes, that's what my PhD became about, Haris, that reflection is a human practice. We all do it. Every single one of us on the planet do it. And we also, I think, have a fairly good understanding of, what gets in our way when we can be stuck in negativity and rumination. So there's a general understanding that that is not helpful. But my research was really, I found, insightful in terms of giving us more information about what constructive reflection looks like. How do we actually build our self-belief in any domain in our lives, but how are we kinder to ourselves versus engaging in reflective habits that may diminish us? So reflection in my research is fundamental to our well-being, fundamental to our ability to look after ourselves in terms of our mental health. And what's at the core of that is really, really giving ourselves permission to build our self-belief, to actually cultivate ways that lift us up and lift each other up.
True. Right. So how would you define a constructive reflection for anyone? Because I think as a word, it's very difficult sometimes for people to really understand, laymen to understand because people really compare the word reflection with an analysis most of the time.
Yes, they do. Can I give you some of the context, some of the history before I answer that question?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, because it came out of it, and I think it's important that I'm really clear. It came out of research where I was talking to leaders. So it's specific to reflection practices that build leader self-belief. So I think that's an important sort of boundary for us to understand. And I partnered with a tech company in Silicon Valley, and I had 150 leaders opt into my PhD study. And I was really interested in what is it that leaders with high self-belief do differently to leaders with low self-belief. And I was able to measure their levels of self-belief using a psychometric tool. And then I basically did an analysis of the high and the low. And that's where reflection came out, the very specific ways that leaders with high self-belief reflect versus those with low. Are you following me so far?
Yeah.
The findings, to your point about how do we, what do we know about constructive reflection? We don't know a lot. So in the literature, we know thinking positively is a good thing and reflecting negatively is a bad thing. But that's pretty much as far as it goes. And when we get into those negative reflection cycles, what I referred to before as rumination, we know that that's correlated with anxiety and depression. There isn't a lot of information about what constructive reflection looks like. So when reflection emerged in my research as a key differentiator between these types of leaders, I was, really excited because we got to have a look finally into what are these leaders doing. And that's exactly what my research found was the leaders had these were leaders that were well experienced in their careers and also those early in their careers. So it wasn't based on length of leadership experience. It wasn't based on gender or age or culture. This was across the sample. Basically, these leaders had learned to practice these ways of reflecting. And it's a process I came to call reflective positivity. And so it's made up of three main dimensions. I'm going to get to your thing about what does constructive reflection look like. I call it reflective positivity. Reflective positivity is three key things. One, that they are actively choosing a positive mindset in the moment. So when things are not going well in a meeting or a discussion with someone, they are actively orienting their thinking to what's possible here. What's the potential in this challenge? What are we learning? So the first one is choosing positivity. That's the first dimension. And that's underpinned by ideas that they talk about belief systems for risk. They have embraced a belief system that people's potential is far more than they can see. So when challenges arise, they're automatically looking for where can we go here? How do we turn this into something that's growth driven? The second area, the second dimension of reflective positivity, I came to call symbiotic growth. So we know about growth mindset and the great work of Carol Dweck, and that's really embraced by organizations, and I think it's fantastic. These leaders take the idea of a growth mindset one step further by basically the symbiosis is their recognition that they only grow through the people around them. So often we think about reflection as an individual process that we do on our own on a Monday morning or a Friday afternoon. We schedule it in the diary, then we get busy and we don't do any of it. These leaders actually recognize that reflecting with others together is actually core to how they look after themselves and the other person in terms of that constructive practices that build self-belief. So symbiotic growth is an acronym I coined called growing with and through others. Very much that concept of I am we, that when I grow, you grow, and when you grow, I grow. And part of that is because they've established this reflective dialogue with their peers or their team or someone special in their lives. It helps them actually really take the learnings out of their life experiences and their leadership experiences. So the other piece of the symbiotic growth is this idea of reciprocal learning. So we often think, particularly for leaders, that we can only learn from people higher than us in the hierarchy, right? Very nice concept. These leaders are reflecting in such a way that they're looking for learning in every exchange, which I think is really powerful.
Right.
And they're open about what they're learning. So regardless of someone's position or title or status, whether they're inside the organization or outside, they're looking to grow through that person. And they recognize that in the exchange, that person may well grow through them. And then the last dimension, so these three dimensions, choosing positivity with growing through others, that symbiotic growth, is what I came to call reflective momentum, Haris, which is basically what you're doing with me now. Actually not reflecting before or after, but during. So connecting the dots in the moment, paying attention to what's going on in the room. So that metacognition, getting on the balcony. And I think that's, to your point earlier, that's actually the biggest aha that people are having, is that people say, oh, I should reflect more, or I don't do it, because they're thinking about those static times in their calendars or in their day. But actually what my research highlighted is that really constructive reflection happens whilst we're leading, whilst we're engaging with someone. We're thinking about what's happening in this moment, where do I want this moment to go, what were my learnings from the past that I can apply to this challenge. Very active, dynamic process. Those three things together is what these leaders were engaging in. Pretty amazing, huh?
Yeah, exciting. See, so I think it's a process which runs anytime and every time that you want to. It's not in silos and calendared in your calendar.
Yeah.
It's on the go.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And we
Yeah.
all have the ability to do it. We're all
Mm,
doing it. You know, some of the ways that it looks when I interviewed leaders that didn't have the self-belief, and I'd
mm,
say to them, you know, this is a really active on the go, as you using your language, on the go process. They
mm,
would say to me, yeah, I don't do that. I know when I'm in a team meeting or I'm in a discussion with someone, I'm kind of stuck. I'm stuck in the
mm,
moment, in the present, or perhaps I'm stuck with, you know, concern and anxiety about the future, and I'm not allowing myself to be freer and actually
mm,
thinking about what might be possible or what we
mm,
might learn together. So it's a very
mm,
active choice, Haris, that we
mm,
all
mm.
have
And we have it all the time, right? I mean, anytime in any interaction, yeah.
in any interaction. I mean,
Mm,
you know, in terms of disclosure, I've had people that have lost loved ones
mm,
and have found the reflective, even though that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, how can I engage in reflective positivity? But it's about what are they learning through this process of grief? Grief is a symbol of love, right? Our
mm,
love and our grief are intertwined. And so, how do we be kinder to ourselves in a very difficult process and recognize that actually it is a growth process,
mm,
whether we choose it or not? How do we choose to focus on what we learned from that person, what we're
mm,
learning about ourselves, what might be
mm,
possible? I
mm,
don't know. I just think I've seen people use it. Obviously, we've been working with teams and with
mm,
leaders, but as you and I talked before, this is actually a human capacity. It's not about the job that you do. It's about who you're being.
yeah. Not about doing, it's just about being.
Yeah.
Wow. Susie, I also want to talk to you about belief system, a little bit more on belief system as whole, self-belief. People have got, high on self-belief, low on self-belief. Talk to me, what are belief system and how are they shaping our leadership style today?
It's a great question. I love that you brought that up because my view is that we don't talk about self-belief enough.
Mm,
Uh, and so when you look at what's happening in the world and what's happening in organizations and the pace and the complexity and the level of change, it's almost an epidemic of people that are struggling to ground themselves in themselves, that feel that they're pulled from left to right, feel judged or diminished or challenged to a point of burnout. There's many different ways that our self-belief, right, which is fundamentally, do I believe in my capacity to lead, or do I believe in my capacity to make good decisions? Do I believe in my capacity to cultivate a positive team environment? It's very domain specific, Haris, to your point
mm,
about why it's
mm,
important. So if you think about it in terms of our leadership style, the research is very clear. Leaders that are high in self-belief, that when I say self-belief, I mean that humble but
mm,
confident leader you come across in a crisis, who
mm,
can be the voice of calmness, who exudes that optimism that that they've just got it. Right? What is it? Why is that so important? We know that those leaders with that level of self-belief will persevere. They are naturally more resilient because that self-belief buffers them psychologically against stress and anxiety. But probably most importantly, they can think beyond. They're more likely to push through to really inspiring goals, set more challenging goals for themselves and their teams, but do it in such a way that people are inspired to follow. And I
mm,
think, to your point about how self-belief matters to humans, but particularly as leaders, is
mm,
when we come across those leaders that don't have that level of self-belief.
mm,
Research is clear, they are more likely to suffer stress and anxiety, engage in behaviors that aren't helpful, give up sooner, not persevere. And so my heart goes out to them because, leading is hard, Haris. Like, it's
mm,
not getting easier. And so it's like an inner foundation for performance and
mm.
well-being. And on that bit, I just want to say, we can go right back to Albert Bandura's work in 1986, his social cognitive theory, where he, talks about this theory of self-efficacy or self-belief, as we're calling it. And there have been tens of thousands of studies that show that your self-belief, the level of self-belief, is positively correlated with your performance. So if your self-belief is high, your performance is high. If your self-belief is low, your performance is lower. And in some of the meta studies, they have shown that someone's work performance, it can account for up to 28% of the difference in work performance from high to low. So it matters. And there was a study done in 2022, I think it was with a construction organization, and they were able to show that for every 1% gain in self-belief, right, leader self-belief, that resulted in an 18.4% gain in the project success.
Okay.
So in my mind, I go to, okay, so how do we, first of all, normalize this idea of self-belief, the importance of self-belief? Skills and competencies are important, don't get me wrong. They are fundamentally about how we get the job done. But self-belief, if we think about it, is in line with the identity piece, which is the operating system that we come from. If we can help lift the belief of individuals and teams, that collective belief, then the logic flows that we also lift performance. And I think the last thing I would say is that the passion for me, yes, is about the performance, but actually in today's world, I feel more grounded to the idea that as we build people's self-belief, we buffer them against stress, we buffer them against anxiety, we equip them to be more grounded and more resilient with the challenges that they may face. And I think that's a really important message.
So to really work on self-belief, what are some of the tips that you will have for a leader? While I understand the benefit and the why should one really work on it, but what are the ways that one can really work on and buffer themselves with the stress and anxiety and equip them with resilience and being present?
So I'm going to park our conversation about reflection, because actually reflection is one of the key strategies, so we can come back to it. In Bandura's original work and in the last 40 years of studies that have supported it, there are 4 key strategies. One is but experiences of success. When you really master something, when you really lead well, when you achieve something well, it's those experiences of success that give us the most amount of data to build our self-belief, right? I think I can. And then I do it, I can. And then it's that ability to use those wins, those successes. So if you think about it, that's why organizations spend a lot of time and energy on those stretch assignments for people, to put them into those challenging situations, to give them that experience of stretch. And then that becomes, when they've done that well, that becomes one of the best ways to build self-belief.
More of a confidence that I can, inspiration.
Exactly. And it's translatable, right? That I was able to project manage that project well to a successful completion. Those skills that I've learned, that ability is translatable to the next project. But that, as I get better outcomes, as I continue to do well, it's like an upward spiral of belief. And of course, the same applies when it's not done well, which we'll talk about, right? What happens then? The second strategy that he talks about is vicarious learning. So seeing people lead well, seeing others do that job well, do that task well, lead that project well, particularly if they're more like you, then that also provides us with the data to build us, if they can do it, maybe I can do it too, right? So having access to those role models, those people that really are out there doing good things in their lives is really important. The third one is this idea of verbal persuasion, which is what my whole career has been based on. That's coaching, right? That's coaching, mentoring, feedback. So positive feedback, well, not just positive feedback, but constructive, encouraging feedback is absolutely a core driver of self-belief. So again, if you're someone that's isolated, that you're not in feedback loops, that you don't have your board or your mentor or your coach or someone internally to go to, you're missing a fundamental avenue to buffer and build your self-belief. It's really important. A lot of clients say to me, but shouldn't that come from within, right? Do I need to rely on others? And it's yes, and it's both. We are both able to sort of self-cultivate that self-belief through putting ourselves in those stretch assignments and doing things well, but we're also a product of the relationships that we're in and the people that we surround ourselves with. So that idea of that encouragement is really important. And then the last one, which won't surprise you, is emotional self-management. So managing our moods well, embracing stress, embracing the kind of challenges that come and seeing them as sort of growth opportunities. So they are the four. And then what I would say to you that Bandura, I think, you know, and the research since, I think the idea of the way we reflect on all of those experiences is fundamental, because I'm sure you've experienced it, Haris, where you've seen people being given access to a stretch assignment, they're in a leadership development program, they're given a coach, and they don't build their self-belief.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what are we missing? And actually what we're missing is that idea that actually that person's level of self-belief is actually based on the ways in which they've reflected on those experiences. If they've reflected in ways that are constructive, growthful, thinking about possibilities, positivity, growing, and to your point, using it actively on the go, those development experiences, applying them in the moment, then we know that they're gonna shift who they're being and that level of confidence. But if there's someone that's gone through a program, engaged in a coach because they were mandated, you know, haven't actually done the reflective work, then they're not going to realize the gains. And therefore, no change. So I would say, you know, for anyone listening to this, my first, there's logistically sort of, what are you putting yourself into and up for? Because challenge is healthy. How clear are you about the successes you've had in your life or your career already? Because they matter. They are like your access to your own success intelligences, right? Again, some people find it, you know, they're not comfortable with talking about their successes or reflecting on their successes, but actually that's the material we need to help them then navigate the next challenge that comes. So being really purposeful about what you've achieved, what worked for you, really having access to those successes is fundamental. Having a coach or someone, a confidant, someone you know that you can go to, that you get that feedback, you get that encouraging, that feedback that conveys, you can do this, you've got this. And then just having access to people that you see doing whatever it is you want to do, but doing it well. What can you learn by observing them? What can you take on that they're doing and practice for yourself? There's some of the strategies I think we can be, I just think we can be more purposeful, more intentional about bringing into our lives.
Yeah, and really work on our self-belief that ways. And is that something really associated with adaptive leadership then? Because when we're learning and growing, is that what adaptive leadership would be?
Yeah. So, you know, I love that adaptive leadership is having its moment. And one of the core elements of adaptive leadership is, first of all, recognizing that you're in an adaptive challenge. So what does that mean? It basically means that the challenge you're facing has no clear, linear, solvable solution, right? That it's going to require creativity, innovation, people getting outside of their comfort zones to learn and grow and move towards a solution. That's adaptive, right? It's not a mechanistic challenge, it's an adaptive challenge. One of the core elements of that adaptive leadership is our ability to self-correct, to self-monitor and self-correct. In other words, to reflect in the moment. whilst we're leading that project team, whilst we're engaged in that dialogue, to actually have and be the voice of, let's just take a moment, right? What are we noticing is going on in the room right now? Or what are we feeling? What are we learning? What are we paying attention to? What are we missing? So that ability to engage in that sort of in the moment course correction through bringing those reflections to the table, reflecting with others, fundamental to adaptive leadership. Otherwise, how do we adapt, Haris? We just set a goal and go for it without making any adjustments along the way. No, we're actually required and require of each other to keep iterating, keep learning, keep reflecting, keep learning, keep reflecting, but most importantly, doing it with and through others.
And that's really the essence of leadership is, right? Being with others and leading others. Yeah.
It's so interesting because you're absolutely right. And yet, again, if we were to sort of look at how people, back to your belief systems question earlier, how people define leadership, those definitions, those hierarchical definitions of leadership are still very prevalent. So depending on the organization, of course, and depending on the person that you are or the people that you're with, but a lot of people don't feel comfortable talking about what they're learning. They should know it already, you know, or that they will only learn from people more senior than them, as I said earlier. This is about a reflective kind of habit of mind that says we're all learning all the time. And our best way to do that is to do it through whoever we happen to be in exchange with. What can we learn from the person that's just joined the team, that's new to the industry, the organization? Kind of fresh perspective are they going to land for us if I go looking for it? So it's tied to that idea that leadership is in everyone, if we believe that. I believe that. And how do we expect it of others? How do we go looking for it in others?
And since we've been really speaking about reflection, you know, in multiple times that you've spoken now, and we did speak about 10 dimensions of reflection earlier before this recording today.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more on that. I mean, what are those dimensions of reflection?
Yes. So we've got the three sort of big dimensions, which is choosing positivity, the growing symbiotic growth, and that reflective momentum. But what's underneath that are some very specific strategies. So I'll give you an example. One of the ones that I loved was the idea of time. So leaders that are engaging in reflective positivity are able to move and do this all the time, move between past, present, and future in their reflections. They're thinking all the time. So the research is pretty interesting that a lot of people, their time orientation tends to be sort of present and past. But actually, and so you can imagine people sort of perhaps sitting in a meeting and they're worried about things going wrong because it went wrong last time. And that's where their attention is oriented. Whereas, again, a leader that's engaging in this idea of reflective positivity is recognizing what's happened in the past and what they've learned from it, paying attention to what's happening in the future so that learning gets applied, in the present, and then directing the conversation to what could be possible in the future. So past, present, and future, because they're constantly scanning across the three. Where are we going right now? Where are we headed? What's happening in this moment? What did I learn about this in the past that I can apply right now? It's a skill. It's a habit of mind. Do you like that idea, Haris, moving across those frames?
Yeah, the time orientation. Interesting, yeah.
So that's one example. The other one we talked about, another one of those 10 elements, is that idea of we want people to reflect. So when I say reflective frequency, it is about still do the prepping and the anticipation and the sort of reflecting before you go into any kind of setting, and the reflection that you do after that experience. Those are still very powerful and important reflective practices. And add in, be more aware, more conscious of what reflection you're doing whilst leading. What are you paying attention to? Where does your mind go to? Because that's another habit that you can start to channel differently.
And this is something I think one needs to be very, very mindful of, because it's not just only after you've experienced you reflect, but before an experience, reflections are important. So that you
Really?
right.
Yeah. Do you see that in your practice? I must say in mine, I think preparation is really undervalued because people are working at such a pace, and that pace is pretty relentless. But if we can help them create just that practice of knowing that 15 minutes before, who do I want to be? What are my intentions? What parts am I going to dial up? Where am I going to focus my attention? It's just makes an enormous impact to how they show up.
It just, for me, I think it seems like it makes you more mindful of how you show up in the moment later.
Yes, exactly. It's like you've readied yourselves, right? You've readied yourself. And actually, I love that you bring in the idea of mindful, and my head goes to mindfulness. I love the idea of mindfulness. I wish I could do more of that meditative, non-judgmental in the moment. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what is the reflective practice that leaders are bringing in the moment, on the go, whilst leading. That's when reflective positivity comes in. It's very conscious because, as you said earlier, leadership is social, right? Leadership only happens through others. And, a really simple definition that I often talk about is leadership is fundamentally the positive influence on others. So if you are having that in any domain of your life, you are leading.
And that could be on yourself as well, right? Positive influence on yourself, on how you led it.
It's so true. That first dimension I said of reflective positivity is choosing positivity, believing in the potential of others. Another key aspect of that is abundance thinking, recognizing when we've gone into scarcity and fear, which we often do under pressure. We know that. Again, a reflective positivity leader will recognize that in the moment and change the direction of their thinking. There I go again. I've gone to scarcity. I'm going to flip the switch. To your point, they're also very good at directing that positivity back to themselves, recognizing when they've done something well, being that voice to themselves, that positive self-talk. We very rarely talk about the ways in which our self-talk can be harnessed for good.
Right.
Right?
And it's also about what you said, experiencing success, to lift up your belief.
Yes. I love, we all have like a to-do list, which is, and then we tick off the to-do list, but that's sort of inherently, it's purposeful, but it feels a bit like transactional and a bit negative, really. Got it done or didn't get all of those things done. Some of my clients have adapted the idea of sitting down every week and writing out their achievements list. Right? And not just their achievements list, but what were the strategies that they used? What were the behaviors that worked for them? And so it keeps it top of mind. Just, 10 minutes, what did I do well this week, right? Because we forget our capacity to forget, we get oriented to the challenge. That's why this is a practice, and it's not an easy practice, Haris. And the other thing I would say, which I get feedback from clients all the time, you're not expected to engage in reflective positivity all day, every day, right? That borders on toxic positivity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We have to be positive all the time. That's not what I'm saying. The research is really clear. It's when you're engaging in leadership, which is with others, that you're engaging in practices that build self-belief, build collective belief, helping others see their potential, helping others believe in possibility, coming at it from an abundance point of view that says we can do this, we can go beyond. What does beyond look like? All of those are choices that leaders are making in the moment when they're leading.
And it's just about a choice. What kind of a choice are you making in the moment so that you're directing and leading others? Yeah.
Yes. So if you think about, our ability to just hold in that micro moment, to pay attention to, oh, okay, what did I just say? Was that, sort of helpful and constructive or not? What impact did that have, and how do I choose something different? That, that pausing moment, it's available to all of us all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we need to have the muscle and the intention to catch ourselves.
Yeah. 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 And that all comes, I think, with being more intentional and conscious. Yeah.
Yes.
In the
Yes.
moment.
Yes. And Haris, I would also say, in the last couple of weeks, I've had some clients that have had some really, really difficult moments that, that they haven't been their best selves. They've been triggered. And I think that's the reality check for this conversation, which is we are emotional beings. So I'm talking about this cognitive process, right, of this executive function of reflection and being in the moment and being present. But we know that the unconscious mind can show up in ways that we can't anticipate necessarily. What I like to think about it, though, is when we are in that moment of feeling fear, anger, resentment, hurt, all those things that we can feel at any time, is that we have built an awareness to at least recognize that's what's going on for ourselves, and to choose something different, whether it's just to exit the conversation or to create some space. So I'm not suggesting, that's why I'm sort of saying this idea of reflective positivity, this process is a habitual, practiced muscle that can help us even when we are not at our best. Right. And actually, I think that's what I was saying about the people that have faced losses and grief. I had one woman say to me, and then I remembered our reflective positivity training and thought to myself, okay, I've been in this enough. I've grieved enough for now, for today. I'm going to now redirect my attention. I'm going to choose to do something else. Does that make sense, Haris?
Yeah,
that we have to go into these negative emotions. These are real. This is our world. And we have an opportunity to self-monitor and then choose, allow ourselves to go there, and then choose when it's right to do something else that's constructive.
So it's really inwards attention to yourself and recognizing what's happening, and then making a choice of what can I do differently.
Yeah. And I think the difference about reflective positivity is, I think what we've known is that, yes, if I can be positive in this moment, I've got to get out of negativity and into positivity. Well, actually, no, what I'm suggesting that reflective positivity teaches us is to ask ourselves questions around, what are we learning? Right? I'm in a really deep, dark place right now. What am I actually learning about myself in this moment? How can I use that? Who can I share that with? That symbiotic growth, right? What are we learning as a team as we go through these struggles? So it doesn't have to be, I'm going to shut down that negative emotion. It's rather that frame that we put on that emotion that says, okay, what are we taking away? What can we use here? Yeah.
Yeah. And also just recognizing what can be more useful, so that we can shift our focus to what can be more useful to us.
It's a beautiful question. I'm sure you've had teams that you've worked with, Haris, that get into those negative spirals, and it's all about scarcity, and it's all about deficit. We don't have enough. Everything's broken.
Yeah.
And reflective positivity, to your point, reflective positivity asks them, first of all, to stop and notice that that's the pathway they've gone down, and that's a choice. They've chosen as a team to go down that pathway, and to what we were saying earlier, and perhaps they needed to understand the core issues. But then, to your point, what would be more useful for us now?
Right.
What can we take away from that episode we just had as a team? What can we use?
So a mindset shift from scarcity to really abundance, what do we see differently?
Yes.
what resources do we have versus what do we not have?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm,
What's possible for us that we're not
mm,
paying attention to? So
mm,
one of the elements of the choosing positivity is exactly that, that
mm,
abundance mindset over a scarcity mindset.
mm,
The other
mm,
one that so you're asking about what the 10 were. The other ones was this idea of cultivating joy, right? Micro
mm,
moments of joy and
mm,
gratitude, Charis.
mm,
You know, what are we grateful for? I mean, isn't that just, that's a challenging question when you're a team that's facing very real challenge.
mm.
But what are we grateful for in this challenge?
Right. There's something about something that we can really feel good about.
Exactly, exactly.
Mm,
And something that I was talking to a client about earlier today, Haris, which is how often we talk to each other about how much we believe in each other's potential. That's the third part of that choosing positivity, abundance mindset, joy and gratitude, and
mm,
believing and embodying
mm.
that positivity through potential.
The potential of others too.
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. So
mm,
others, the
mm,
team, and then we're back to that idea of, you know, those lovely solution focused questions. When have we
mm,
faced this before? What strategies did we use? What do we know works? But there's an underlying belief system that says, I believe you can do this.
mm,
I
mm,
believe in your ability. I
mm,
believe in our ability. That's that
mm,
collective self belief.
mm. That's like a premises we all sit on, and then we have this thinking process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah. So I wonder what would change in some of those team dynamics if we talked more about our level of belief in one
Mm,
another.
mm, mm, mm.
Sounds quite empowering, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just experiencing what you're saying in my head right now.
Are you, tell me, what are you thinking? What are you
Yeah,
reflecting on?
yeah. I mean, it's so common in at workplaces. What we when we work with them, I mean, we're talking about what do we not have, what do we need to work on, but not really sitting down with, pausing and reflecting on what do we really have that we can cherish and enjoy and be grateful about,
Yeah,
and then operate from a mind of abundance rather than scarcity.
yeah,
Mm,
exactly. Very beautifully said.
mm,
Beautifully said. And to your point earlier, we can choose to do that at any point
mm,
in
mm.
our days, at any time, with anyone.
Right, right. At any time, true. Susie, what a wonderful conversation with you. A lot of learning that I'm writing down while I'm talking, yeah, from you. Susie, you also have a book coming soon, right? Uh, Tell us a little bit about what are you busy writing?
So, as we started in this conversation, reflection sits at the heart of wisdom. Our research, and particularly our experience with clients internationally, is that people are looking for new ways to think about leadership and how they bring more wisdom to their
Hmm.
teams, to their lives.
Yeah.
So we are in the process of writing the Wise Leader Field Guide, Haris. So it's our attempt, so Dr. Paul Lawrence and I in partnership, it's our attempt to provide individual leaders and teams and people, you know, broadly in life with some perspectives, some tools and techniques like the one
Mm,
you just gave us then, right? What if we sat down and took a moment to really
mm,
cherish what we do
mm,
have? How might that
mm,
shift things? Book. So the Wise Leader Field Guide, but it's a work in progress, Haris.
mm,
And you'll be pleased to know that at the core of it is this idea of that reflective muscle that all of
mm,
us have available to us.
mm. Okay. And when are we getting that work published?
I think you'll see it published in 2026. So you're getting the
Mm.
early read on this, Haris. Yes.
I will look forward. I'm sure I'll be the one who will probably be the first one to order that for myself. Mm,
Wonderful.
mm. Susie, thank you so much for this talk today, for this conversation, and allowing us and our listeners to learn from you. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to continuing our conversations beyond this podcast.
Thank you, Haris. And thank you for the wonderful questions. It's been a real joy
Same here.
today. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you. So, Susie, I've got John meeting with John today, by the way, in about an
Oh,
hour
that's
from now. Yeah.
great. Leader, Haris. So
Mm.
I thought of him because he's doing some incredible work in your region. Might be great for your coaches to hear from a client per se.
Right.
But I also think that he could just be a great contact for you. So I hope you enjoy the connection.
Yeah. And thank you so much, by the way, for putting that through.
You're
I sent him
welcome.
my calendar. I sent him my calendar link, and he's booked it for today. So I've got it in the next hour from
Great.
now. Yeah. So he was your client earlier?
He was. He was back in when he was at 20th Century Fox. So he has an incredible career for the entertainment industry, and now he's in Saudi Arabia working for some of the different ministries, and he works
Oh.
globally. So very interesting background, Haris, and
Hmm.
very telling ideas about leadership.
Wow. Wow. I would love to connect, and today I've got a meeting, and I will let you know how did it go for you. Yeah. I'll let you know.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And Suzi, you are speaking for our community as well, right? For coaches on our webinar.
Yeah, so I was just talking to Paul about that. We just have to we're going to be in Europe. We're based in London from April to July, and that means we're in a better time zone. We just need to land on a date. So I know
Hmm.
I've been sent a calendar link, but yes,
Hmm.
we're going to be talking on the Wise Leader. So we'll talk more about reflection, multiplicity, transcending
Hmm.
selves, thinking about change, all
Hmm.
those elements. How does that sound, Haris?
Wonderful. I think must have skills and knowledge for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. It's really important. It's just a different
Yeah.
way of thinking about leading, and it
Right.
will add
Right.
what they already know, like you've done with me today. I could see you kind of integrating it
Hmm.
into your
Hmm.
own, experience.
Right. 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 So relevant to the world today, and anybody who is working in a leadership position. Things are becoming very complex the way they are today. I mean, you've got
Exactly.
virtual reality now. You've got
Exactly.
AI, you've got people working remotely. I mean, I do have a team member who's been working for now 3 years and I've not met him, so but then they're a close team member, right? So that's a reality of us now.
Yes. It's much more complex. And I think the requirement, as you said, on leaders is just a lot higher. So, the wise leader is probably beautifully positioned for people like yourself and, experienced coaches that are looking for more, to
Mm,
deal with what their clients are bringing to them.
mm.
And I don't know, Haris, if there's an opportunity when we are in Europe. I mean, obviously, we're more than happy to do the webinar, but we run master classes on it as well. So if that's something you want to hear more about, I can send you some information that you could,
I'll be
we
interested.
in partnership to your
Mm.
coaches.
We would love to hear more information and maybe partner with you on that.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm,
because John was saying to me in the Middle East, I know I'm putting it, that's abroad, but the concept of wisdom is alive and well. And in terms of culturally, religiously, like it's an important, and so I think some of our wise leader principles would sit incredibly well with the work that you're doing already.
mm. Thank you. Thank you, Susie, once again. I'm looking forward to catching up with you soon. And when you're in the Europe, I would like to again have you on board for us for a webinar. Yeah.
Sounds great, Haris.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Do,
today. That was fun. Great
thank
questions.
you. Thank you. Do send me the details of the masterclass, okay?
I will do. I
Mm.
will do. All right.
Where in the Australia, by the way, you are?
Sydney.
Sydney, okay. Because
Yeah.
I did plan to travel later next year, this year,
Great. Let
around
us know.
November.
Let us. Great. You must come and we'll show you around.
Yeah, sure.
Have
Thank
you
you. No, I haven't been before. No.
Okay. Okay.
Mm,
Yes.
mm,
Well, it's a beautiful place and it's fascinating. So,
mm.
is it holiday or work, Haris?
Both. Not really
Okay.
work, but I just said I've got my clients based out of Sydney and Melbourne and Perth, so I might as well talk to them to meet with them. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, let me know.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Thank
To meet you in person.
you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Haris. Lovely to see you. Bye.
Bye.